of potential alternatives is in front of us, that's when we'll have a clearer sense of how deep this discussion really needs to be amongst ourselves with our community, let alone amongst each other. So I'm optimistic about a third meeting. I think that the Terra Nova Theater might actually be the best place to do it, just because it seems like it's big enough. I am hesitant because I don't think we could facilitate remote access through that venue, but I'm also where I don't know what I don't know before we have that analysis. But I think that 3 and 4 are for sure. What I'm wondering is if we're going to need a 5th. But I'm not ready to discuss a 5th because I don't yet know what the other potential alternatives are. And so I think that if we're going to do a meeting number 3 in this big, big way, it's going to be a long, hard day of hard work. Mr. Steckpart referred to it in a certain way that was somewhat hyperbolic, and yet I think perhaps perceptive. And I think that we have to be committed to a very full day of work to see what we get out of it that is either workable in a meeting number 4 or will need to be worked through a meeting number 4 and 5. And that's where my focus is. The OPAs, if you will, other potential alternatives.
Meaning the green sections?
In
Okay.
reference to the green stuff,
Thank you, yeah.
Sue Beckmeyer.
Well, we've received a lot of email. I spend time meeting with people personally, not everyone in the room, but a few people, to hear their concerns, both prior to this meeting and just after the December 5th meeting. So with that feedback, and reading the email that I've received, I want to echo something Peter Loeb said, which is, and also other people have commented, that we can all agree that we're confused. There's a level of confusion, or at least a not understanding of what's before us. We don't have that confidence, I'm going to say.
Right.
I mean, for myself, speaking for myself, I don't have the confidence in what is in this document to be able to explain it to someone else. I work in an elementary school. If you can teach somebody else what, the concept is, it reinforces your own understanding. It helps you understand where the differences lie. And I'm not personally in a position to do that. I hear a lot of conjecture, frankly, about where did this SRA concept come from? And, is it from the realtors? That was surprising to me to hear that, because I can tell you where part of it came from. It came from statewide work in response to communities up and down this coast that say, Coastal Commission, you can't keep treating us all the same. You have to understand that we have unique differences. And each community, and Del Mar was brought up a lot, that is one community that is, very unique. Pacifica, very unique. We talk about it all the time in very general terms, so much so that, we take it for granted, but yet when we stop and cogitate on the fact that 6 out of our 7 hotels are in the coastal zone. That's a driver for our economy. Most of our businesses are in the coastal zone. That's a driver for our economy. And so when you hear words and questions that people ask, where's the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for this? Protecting our community and its fiduciary ability to function is our primary responsibility. And so everything we do, we have to look at what does it look like? How does that work? And so the SRA concept, I truly do think was the first pass, and first pass is never the perfect one, at creating something like a neighborhood approach. And I don't mean a neighborhood like Edgemar, Fairway Park West, but it ends up looking that way because it is all in certain defined areas. I hear words like redlining. Whoa, that is, and I also get, someone mentioned it on public comment. What is the difference if you're in the SRA or you're not in the SRA? These are all questions that we all need to have answers to, and a good deal of the scenarios that staff is talked about producing so that we could compare and look at what does this mean. So I think I'm encouraged, honestly, by the commonality. Someone asked me recently, what did you think about the December 5th meeting? How do you think it went? And my honest response was, I liked it a lot better than the July 2018 meeting at the community center. Now, did we walk away fully, completely understanding everything? No. But we also were civil, and it had an opportunity for an exchange of ideas. Was it the perfect format? Was it the right, could everyone hear everyone? No, I couldn't. It was a loud room. We are constrained by the facilities that we have in Pacifica. So earlier, we heard a request about having hybrid ability, and I want to go back to that, on that point. Your comment, council member, former mayor, Big Stick, about we had the pandemic, we had COVID interrupt us, and we did. And one outcome of that is we figured out ways to do business that didn't involve everyone show up at a meeting at a time certain and a place certain. And so while this city is more hampered, for example, than the county of San Mateo in its ability to have a hybrid meeting, call in, we made what we can do, and we've improved it. The first time we did it was a disaster. I mean, the very first meeting, no one could hear. There were all these delays. It was really challenging, but think about how not that long ago that was. And we've improved our process. So, I would love it if we had a video way of doing that, but we don't. We at least have a way for people to hear what's going on and to call in and make comment. So I feel that that is a really key aspect of meetings going forward, that we need to look at facilities in where can we do that? We can do that here. We can't do it in the community center that we're aware of. What I heard the city manager say was, or maybe in the staff report, I forget where, or in questions to council or something, there may be vendors that could accomplish it for us, that we could bring in. I mean, when you think about conferences that you go to at big facilities, there's vendors that come in and do a lot of the AV and communications. So that's one possibility. I heard, and I really like the idea of some kind of facilitated online forum. That's another way that people can access the information and that there is a public record. Right. So there are a lot of really good ideas that have been brought forward, and I would like to have the time to use the best suggestions and the ones that we can actually do in Pacifica. And that was why I asked the original question about the timeline. And I hear three of us for sure bringing up that point, and I'm sure others have similar concerns. I did want to spend a minute or two really delving into that, because, this idea of we want to get this done, we just want to get it done, it needs to move on. Since 2009, we've been working on it. Things have evolved over that time, Our understanding has evolved. There are questions of science. There are questions of sea rise, the impact of sea rise. Where is that for Pacifica right now? And we have to look to the future. But where is your timeline? Where's your comfort zone? Where's your ability to predict? I think that the timeline of Pacificans, property owners, council members, the city government is slightly shorter and a little different than the purview and the vision and the view of the Coastal Commission. And so they have their things they need to be responsible for. We have our things we need to be responsible for. And what I'm looking for is that Venn diagram overlay that we can live with. What I've heard, and I agree with 100%, is that we worked hard to get our 2020 submission done. It wasn't easy. It was quite, when I said I didn't like the July 2018 meeting so much, that was one of the low points from my point of view in civic discourse in this community, and I don't want that. A suggestion was made by email over this last week in preparation for this meeting to us that perhaps we should consider, in the issue of should we have a facilitator, perhaps we should consider asking for some support from the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center.
Yeah.
I support that idea. I think they're specifically trained in addressing conflicting viewpoints. And that is, we have a lot of those right now. But that doesn't mean we can't work through them. In the end, and I'm going to wrap it up, Mayor, I promise. In the end, I think in terms of going back to timeline, what I really need to understand is exactly the full menu of options that is available to this council. Because the idea that we need to do this fast to meet this June deadline so that we can move on to move back or focus on other priorities, I need to really understand the statutory deadlines. Where are we with our Coastal Commission requirement at this point in time? What amount of time do we actually have to work with? Because in the meantime, over these years, these recent years, we also got hit with a pretty big RENA number. We are also trying to work on a housing element that helps us address that. So Coastal Commission, state requirement, state law, agency that enforces it. Housing and Community Development, State Department, has mandates for housing and lots of state laws that are being approved every cycle that affect that. How do these things combine? How do they overlay? They're not independent of each other. Short-term rentals, that was brought up. And it's a huge factor in all of this. So we have to be able to put all these things together, and I don't think we can do it on a 2-meeting timeline. I don't think we can do it on a 4-meeting timeline, to be honest with you. So I feel like we need to have some combination of good ideas around some electronic. I really like the Ask Me Anything format. I don't know if that's what maybe that's a copyrighted thing, I don't really know. But something like that would give people a chance to submit questions, staff to respond to them, and everyone to see those responses. It might generate more questions, it might, and that might take more time. But this is our community. We have to do this. And we have to do it in a way that is right for this city. Not for the Coastal Commission, not for what did Del Mar do, not for, we got to do it for Pacifica. So, long-winded, yes, but that's why I waited until the last, except for the mayor's really the last. But the good news for you all is she's not very long-winded, so she probably will give me some of her time.
Okay. Before Mary has some additional things, but since I haven't said a word yet.
Please.
When I left the December 5th meeting, I had way more questions than answers. I was briefed ahead. I read it. I still had more questions than answers when I left. There are things like that no one may be able to answer. What happens if you're inside the SRA or outside the SRA? What happens with your insurance? What happens with lending? What about your property values? What's the difference? What's going to happen? No one may be able to answer those questions, but they're big in people's minds, and that's really important. I can see that we're going to need more than these 4 meetings also. The fact that there's only an hour for question and answer while we're there also seems too short to me, because once people read all the questions, they're going to have more questions, which is how I felt about the last meeting. I think we need to have it in a location where the largest possible number of people can attend and the ability for everyone to participate. Zoom participation, phone participation, everything. And one thing I've never advocated for, that I'm going to advocate for this time, is sending a postcard to every single person who owns any property here or lives in the city of Pacifica. And the reason, and it's very expensive, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but this is one of the most important issues we have facing the entire town. And we have people who will say, oh no, it only affects those people down on Beach Boulevard. This affects every person who lives here, who owns here, who comes here, who enjoys it here. It's really the most important thing that we have been doing for years and years and years. And I think everyone needs to know about it, however we let them know. I would tell you that most people read it online, but there are people who don't. And this time is an exception, I think. Mary, you want to talk? No?
Oh, sure. Well, I was just going to say about the AMA that asked me anything. It would probably be a good idea to have a start and a finish to that. Just so, and maybe that can be on a postcard so people understand, like you have this much time to participate in this forum. I think one of the most important things to me is that we're able to understand the comparisons of the draft modifications next to the original LCLUP so that we can understand fully really what's being changed and then why and how it affects. So there's like columns of information that I think need to be shared so there's a full understanding. PCRC, yes, please contact them, see if they can be available to help us with that. It's an unbiased, wonderful agency that can come in and help us. Somebody asked about, it was one of the phone callers asked about, well, how much sea level rise is there anyway? And that made me think about the data. And we need updated data. So there's a lot of things that are going to have to happen, and I also agree that we're going to need an additional couple meetings plus an online forum. I appreciate the Terra Nova Theater. It's kind of arranged weird, but I don't know. They might have tech abilities, I'm sure, in there, so we can check it out.
It just seemed like the biggest venue I could think of that's in town.
Yeah.
Specifically, that's why I brought that up. And to technology, I think it's a good time to talk to PCT and ask them what they may be able or not be able to do. Sometimes when we have discussions like this, Marty Anaya is out there in television land, screaming at the television, absolutely or absolutely not, or, and I feel like I want him here screaming that at us. And, while I am at the mic, to Mayor's point about postcards, going to every homeowner, every resident, is that inclusive of every business owner?
Yeah.
Everyone.
Thank you.
She's looking at,
Sorry. Christine.
yeah. No, I want to thank both Sues for your comments, really important, and I agree with them all too. I also agree we need a postcard. Yeah, and sending it to businesses too would be great, because a lot of them I'm talking to don't really know, and we're doing this to protect our businesses and they don't even know, right? So What I want to say is, and I really appreciate Mayor Pro Tem, and you're working with the Coastal Cities Working Group, and the experience you're bringing, talking about this new approach of SRAs. I mean, I don't know how I feel about it yet, but I don't think anybody does, right? I mean, this is groundbreaking work for the whole state. These kind of policies have not been tried anywhere, to my understanding, right? So no wonder we're confused. And I think it was Tiger that mentioned, this is our first draft. This may not be where it's going. I think the first question is really, to Mary's point, understanding the 125 comments, the greenies, what are we not getting out of that? What might these SRAs help us in those two areas where we need the commercial viability, and so forth? And then so I feel like we've jumped ahead, right? We need to understand what we have, what we can work with, what we can't, and then start to craft these policies and what we need. And because right now I'm seeing a lot of resistance to those too, and so whether the benefits aren't fully explained or whether the potential negative implications of having deed restrictions and so forth are really too great for that. I'm concerned about asking staff to do so much more time providing all these examples and so forth now until we know that that's the path we're really interested in going down. So, and that may be where, we have more than one meeting and we start with the 125 and understand where it's missing and go from there. I mean, we are tight on money as a city. We're tight on staff time. I mean, but these are critical discussions we're having. I mean, we're seeing the damage that's happened just in the last few weeks. At Beach Boulevard and Rockaway, I haven't dared to walk out to the Manor Cliffs yet. Since I've been back, I'm going to do that this week. These are really pressing issues in our city, and we need to address them, and we need to find a path forward, and we need to spend this time and educate ourselves and educate the community. So, yeah, like Peter, I'm in agreement with everything I've heard. I think the community really is on board with wanting to understand and move us forward.
Okay, go ahead.
But I did want to say that even within what we already have received are the green and white bar questions and some questions that came up at the December 5th meeting. We already have some questions that need to be resolved. There's a big question about roofs, for example. Roofs are a big deal. And we need to, that alone could be a deal breaker because everybody's got to get a roof done, right? As an example, not to deliberate too much on that point. One point that was brought to my attention that I didn't personally go looking for it, but the person who asked me the question is pretty thorough. And the question is, what about disaster replacement? And I think that kind of goes to insurance a little bit, but if you're in the SRA, and what if you have a catastrophic loss? Can you rebuild? What if you're outside the SRA? Can you rebuild? And if you can, with what constraints? What are the covenants that are now, or the requirements that are now put on that wouldn't have been under the 1980 LCLUP? We need to know that for us to be able to make an informed, best decision on behalf of this community. We were elected to do that. And, we got to just take as much time as it takes to figure these things out.
Okay.
If I may, Mayor Vattel,
Yes, please.
try to synthesize a little bit, but if council's going to continue discussion, I can wait.
There are no lights on at the moment.
So a couple points. One is that I'm hearing interest in potentially more than 4 meetings. And a question to the council is, do you want to say potentially 5, dependent on how 4 goes? One of the variables here is Coastal Commission and Coastal Commission staff. And I was going to ask Ms. Cervantes, because there is a timeline, once our resubmitted LCLUP is accepted for completion, then there's statutory timeline, I think it's 3 months, within which they have to act to give themselves a year extension. So there's at most a 15-month period for Coastal Commission action, and that was the deadline that we faced last December. Is that correct summary of how that works?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So one of the aspects of the timeline also is that we can take more time to get to the point of submitting alternate modifications in letter to coastal staff. Until we get to that point and we submit that letter, we don't know how coastal staff is going to react to that, and that may trigger more meetings and more work, or maybe they are on board and they take it to Coastal Commission and Coastal Commission acts, and then that triggers it coming back to the City Council. So there's sort of an element here where it's like turning in a draft is the analogy I would use to get feedback on it, to know what your next step or revisions might need to be. And what I'm hearing suggesting is that we're just going to delay the due date extend out the due date for turning in that draft before we even have any feedback from coastal staff about it. Because let me remind the council and the public, the only certain feedback from Coastal Commission staff is when they publish their recommendation to the commission. Feedback from staff conversations, that's not an official position. So we truly don't know, and this is what happened with the previous submittal, we truly don't know what staff is going to recommend until we get to that actual publishing of their recommendations. So I want to highlight those points because they're important variables in how we strategize submittal milestones and the work that we're going to do. And then I do just want to reiterate, because part of this discussion tonight is I need the council's authority to revise the planning department and city manager's department work plan to accommodate these extra meetings. And some of the delays have already been mentioned. The short-term rental ordinance is not going to get worked on. The heritage tree ordinance is not going to get worked on. The outside commercial permit ordinance revisions is not going to get worked on. Phase 2 of housing element rezonings is going to get delayed. One of the real priorities we have in parallel to the LCLUP work is the housing element and the Phase 1 rezonings, but implementation of the housing element and work on affordable housing projects and such, these are all coming out of a 4-person planning department and me in the city with our resources. Those are going to get delayed. So I just want to be very clear as I can with the council, about what the impacts on other strategic plan priorities are for the council, and then you get to decide. So, and I'll memorialize those in a report to council about the impact of the work plan. And actually, as we start the mid-year budget process and we roll into our strategic plan update, we can talk about that. So all of that stuff is going to slow way down in order to extend meetings on this, in order to get to a point where we can submit our best ideas to coastal staff and then see where it goes. So I want to be very clear about that. So a couple things that I'm hearing are the idea of spending time on developing some sort of rolling online Q&A for a start and finish period of time. It seemed to have some legs. The idea of talking to the Peninsula Conflict Resolution, I mean, I guess that's one specific resource, facilitation resource, mediation resource. We can talk to them, but I guess I'd ask the council's flexibility in selecting the mediator or facilitator we would need for this next meeting, because they might not be available, or there might be other ones that are available. So that's one thing that I heard. Looking at a venue like the Terra Nova Theater, again, there are probably outfits out there, vendors that do, well, I know there are, that do, full-blown portable, Zoom hybrid meetings. You're just talking money. My guess would be $20K to run a meeting for a vendor like that, based on what I've seen before. So we're talking extra money, and I'm, at this point, I don't think I need to bring anything back to the council for that, but, and then postcard, I think that's, staff time to develop it. I think it's around $5,000, $6,000 of postage to do a postcard citywide. We've done it for the LCLUP process. We've done it for BBURP. We can do that again. We won't know certainty about actual meeting dates, so we could pick the next meeting date and say, well, this is the next meeting date, and here's how you get on the mailing list and that kind of thing. And to pay attention to future meeting dates. I guess a question would be, is there more input about venues? Because I have no idea what internet connection is like at Terra Nova, at Terra Nova High School, right? Because a Zoom hybrid's got to run off their system unless these outfits also bring their own system. So I don't know.
One other venue I wanted to mention for consideration is Skyline. And I think it is within the city limits. Maybe it's outside.
No.
When he said it's the biggest one in Pacifica, I'm like, well, what about Skyline? Okay, San Bruno. All right, but it's very close.
Yeah.
They may,
You just
their
can't
theater.
can't have a council meeting outside the city.
Oh, it has to be within the city limits. Oh.
Okay, never mind.
Good try.
Tiger?
Um,
Thank you, Christine.
I think that we're referencing PCRC because they're generally trusted by the community, let alone us, but certainly through the mayor. I think that if you work with city manager to pick the right facilitator with
Okay.
the understanding that we know PCRC, we trust them, ultimately we trust your decision. Again, I think that a quick conversation with Marty and I might be very helpful. He's a resource to us as far as I can tell. And the city absolutely is supportive of PCT, so it would be good to see if perhaps he could figure out an arrangement for less than $20K. And this isn't coming out of nowhere. I actually attended the Half Moon Bay City Council reorg, and I saw the way that that was set up in a not proper chamber. It was a community room apparently, and PCT had it rigged up in such a way that it worked as smoothly as it does for us here. So I'd be very interested to at least pick his brain as a starting point to see what that looks like to get the remote access going. When it comes to the Ask Me Anything session, I think generally they work as a live person is on the other end of the forum for whatever the period of time is. So it's understood between the hours of X and Y, whomever, Stephanie or Kristen or whomever is on the other line, and this is the time to get those questions going.
Sorry, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, please do.
I just don't think we can have a live person do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have too many other things going on. I think that people can submit questions and then they get answered, but
And-
only for a short time.
And I will say that most of the questions that staff is answering will have legal review, which we will not be able to have, real time. So,
In that case, I leave it to staff and took it as good advice that Mary said there'd be limitations involved in however we do it.
A couple things. One, I just wanted to throw out an idea that we just do this on Zoom, or mostly on Zoom, and maybe have one place for people who don't have Zoom access. And I say that because the last BBERT meetings, we had one in person and one on Zoom, and the one on Zoom was much better attended. That, takes away the whole complications of the space and remote viewing. Maybe the live is here, but we ask people to not come here unless they absolutely, don't have a good internet connection or a good place, or maybe there's another viewing area in the library or so. Just something to throw out. This isn't the meeting where we're deliberating and making decisions. This is a meeting where people are trying to get questions answered and understand. So is it as important for us all to be there together? I'm just throwing it out. I'm okay either way. And then just back to the schedule. I want to make sure Kevin's listening. Something that he said just reminded me of the long-term process that was explained to us back in meeting 1. So we're going to get to this point where we write this letter to the Coastal Commission, and then they will be rewriting our LCP, supposedly, and the staff report that goes to the commissioners. There'll be a lot of changes to our LCP to incorporate their changes, to maybe put in these SRAs. I don't know what the format is going to be. And there may be some time back and forth with staff before that happens. Kevin was just insinuating that, and so that might be a delay within their 2 to 3 months to a year plus process. But at the end, this is what was explained. So all this is happening between our staff, mostly Coastal Commission staff, so the final version, we're not even looking at that goes to the Coastal Commission, is what I understood. So it's not until it goes to the Coastal Commission and they approve it or make changes, then it comes back to us. And I'm just wondering if we might need another step in between there to make sure we're on board with what the staffs are presenting to the commissioners. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry I got derailed by the particulars. It occurs to me it is getting late.
And maybe Kevin can just say if what I've said is true or not, because maybe I misinterpreted it at meeting 1. But
So,
In light of the analogy you gave before, too, if you can throw that in terms of this idea of more time to resubmit or extending the deadline without knowing what we need to change, right? Isn't that where you were going with that?
repeat that again, please.
The deadline to submit our draft, right? When you were using the analogy of a
Well,
draft that you submit.
we're not
for
resubmitting
feedback.
our draft, though, is what I understood. Just a letter.
Right.
If I understand what you're saying, yes, there's a decision about, hey, I'm working on this concept, let's get some feedback on it before really developing that concept in a paper,
Right.
spending way more time on it, and then submitting it to get feedback, because the feedback may be the same, and you would have saved a bunch of time if you got it earlier on. That's a little bit the way the Coastal, and Ms. Cervantes, please correct me, that's a little bit way the feedback from Coastal Commission staff works. And to the point, I think Councilmember Bowles was making about another visitation of what coastal staff recommends. If you recall back with this last submittal, they published their staff report, their recommendations to Coastal Commission with a hearing that was literally 2 weeks after that publication point. And we could have had kind of a special council meeting, emergency council meeting scheduled in order for council to make comments on their recommendation. That's, I think, the only way you can provide input at that time, is have within, who knows, maybe they would, I don't know how short their timeline would be, but the last time it was only a couple of weeks. So you'd have to hold this meeting, make quick comments to officially be in the record to say, the city council agrees with X, Y, and Z and disagrees with A, B, and C in what your staff is recommending, and it goes to coastal commission, doesn't change anything in the process, it still goes to coastal commission.
Yeah, but
for decision.
what's a little bit different, when the last one was submitted in 2020, there were letters that went back and forth between our staff and coastal commission staff, and even the letters before our hearing that very clearly laid out from coastal commission staff the areas of disagreement. So, yes, they redlined and we only had 2 weeks, but I think most of those red lines were pretty clear from in previous letters that we should know how they felt about those things. And that's what's missing now, and other people have said that, we're not getting
I don't agree with
coastal
that.
commission, no?
I don't agree with, I know you've read the letters, I've read them too, I don't agree with that assessment. I
Okay.
think what I saw in that red line was much more far-reaching than what I read in those letters. I
But,
think
okay.
along a theme,
Yeah.
I'll give you that, along a theme.
Right.
But it was bathed in red. It was a seriously
Right.
marked up. And
but
I
I
don't
think you-
think I got that from the letters.
But I
that
think you have to agree that we weren't, what we submitted, they had major objections to before we submitted it. Right.
That's possible. I don't know. Before, I don't know if I can say before. But on some level, I have to say, yeah, and it's our plan, and that's the challenge. We have to make sure it works for Pacifica, not for the Coastal Commission per se. I mean, who is our, who are we doing this for,
Well,
right?
I understand that, and to Sam's point, and to some of City Attorney Kenyon's comments, I mean, and that's where I'm confused. I mean, some of it is the Coastal Act, which is law, and other parts are more subject to interpretation, and we have some leeway. And I think that's what's really muddy in my mind, right? And in a lot of people's. Anyway, what I'm hoping is that we don't get through this process, and then the Coastal Commission staff changes everything that we've done, and then we have something that we can't approve again, that goes to the commissioners. I just want to make sure we're working towards a path where we actually have a chance to get this approved. And so whatever we can do to have more of those conversations and more back and forth, and if it needs to come back to council, because staff is talking to staff, but, if you need to come back to us, if something is really a sticking point, then come back to us. Instead of just letting them, put forth, what they think is best.
Tiger?
So
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
the point is well taken that this seems to be a quasi-iterative process insofar as we seem to have some momentum going between our staffs versus whether or not the Coastal Commission staff will simply turn around and make a final recommendation to Coastal Commission, at which point the presumed iterative process ceases to be. Coming back to questions around timeline, I'm not looking for infinite meetings. I'm trying to wrap my head around a piece of information that I don't currently have that I think is going to be a big conversation point for our community. And again, what that boils down for me is other potential alternatives. I think we need to have that conversation about the special resiliency areas so that we have that clarity amongst ourselves, which largely is a discussion that has not happened. But I think that in that mix, we need to know what other potential alternatives look like so that we can then begin that robust conversation. And the only thing I don't know right now is I have a presumption that a fourth meeting might be enough time, but a fifth meeting probably would be enough time. And I'm just looking for seeing the menu at this point to figure out if I need that extra meeting beyond the fourth. I don't think I need more than that, but, I want to know what I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I want to get a sense for planning purposes, whether it's 4 meetings or 5 meetings, but council always has the prerogative to decide at a meeting whether they're not ready to make a decision and do another meeting. As to the issue of other potential alternatives, I wanted to make sure Ms. Cervantes could chime in. I'm not aware of, other potential alternatives that have practically been discussed that are as significant as the neighborhood's approach represented by the special resiliency areas to get this across the finish line. But if there's anything you want to add.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Woodhouse. That is correct. At this point, staff, we don't have other alternative modifications besides what's included in the SRAs. I can tell you from conversations, we have ideas of what that would look like, and there's certainly some suggested modifications that's really easy to say, this is an alternative other modification because it's like a typo or something that Coastal Commission did not completely understand, so they made a revision on that. So there's some that I can point to and say, well, we're going to suggest a modification to that because it's a typo or something that we've discussed with staff that they did not understand. But on the greenies, we don't have alternative mods. On the big policy items, we don't have alternative mods finalized yet.
Finalized. Sorry, you said finalized yet, but there might be some modifications to the greenies that you foresee happening in this process? Like for example, I'm just thinking the substantial structural modifications again. One of the things that I'm stuck on is that the permits to define this 50%, you go back to when the building was built. Who knows when that was? Do we have all the permit records? Like, is there a reasonable way to set a date of when that starts, whether it's now or whether it's when the Coastal Act? I mean, so are you presenting those to us, or are we suggesting some of these? And how and when does that happen in this process?
Yeah, so Mr. Woodhouse, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard two different things tonight. I've heard that we want to discuss the alternative mods at meeting 3, which staff, we can draft some alternative mods to present to you for you to react and look at, or we can do more, robust. We give you the suggested mods again, and you provide the alternative mods.
I think maybe we're like mixing up terms or something, because I think what we're talking about reviewing at the next meeting is the greens. And so, yeah, and so I think, yeah, there might be a little confusion there. At least there was for me, for what you just said and what I thought we were talking about. It's two different things.
Tiger and then Christine.
And I think what Mary said is probably right. There's a couple different references on packet page 218, one at the top, one at the bottom. And one at the top is, due to the complexity and implications of the SRAs and the associated policies, it was not possible to discuss other potential alternative modifications at the December 5th meeting. And toward the bottom, you have this other sentence: the agenda packet for meeting 3 would include the draft comment letter to CCC, including all potential alternative modifications in italics that will be eventually discussed and decided by council at meeting 4. So all I'm saying is that I feel like I'm going to have a full and robust sense of what the entire menu of options are at the next meeting. And I feel like depending on what that menu looks like and where the conversation goes at the next meeting, that will substantially be able to decide for me and my advocacy whether or not I'm going to need to untangle more questions that have come up, or whether or not I'll feel more comfortable going into a 4th meeting, because it feels like the SRAs have been discussed through at meeting 3, and the other options that may or may not exist may or may not be relatively straightforward. And from this point, not at meeting 3, I'm very curious as to what meeting 3 reveals.
So I want to clarify here. So the goal, as recommended in the staff report, is meeting 3 is when we say alternative modifications, the Coastal Commission staff have recommended modifications. We're working on what are the alternative modifications we want to recommend back. So just to define that term. SRA is one of those alternative modifications that is a large concept that has ramifications for a lot of the other 125 comments and some of those greenies. The scope of meeting 3 is of those 125 comments, and members of the public mentioned this, there's a lot of those that are not really controversial. And we talked about that at meeting number 1. So how much time do we need to spend on those? Those are definitely on the table to talk about if the council needs to talk about, but we'll focus on all of them because, again, going back to the draft concept, our concept is we want a draft letter that's addressing everything. It's a very initial draft so that the council can react to it and discuss it. And that includes, you know, a draft related to all the non-greenies in the 125 comments, as well as the greenies. And we, at that meeting, are using the results of case studies that help explain the policies. And by that, I mean, and what we're looking at, and Mr. Cervantes, please correct me, but selecting types of projects like a house remodel that's in an SRA under coastal commission that's evaluated under coastal commission modifications, or in an SRA that's evaluated under council recommended alternative modifications, or is not in an SRA, or is evaluated based on the 1980 LCLUP. So there's 4 scenarios for one house remodel. What on the ground is practically different about those? That's the concept we're going for in the case studies because it demonstrates in a storybook fashion how the impact of these policies, what the impact of these policies would be. Is that an okay summary of that?
Mr. Woodhouse, yes. So at this point, staff we're considering the case studies, as Mr. Woodhouse mentioned, different types of projects that we might see in different areas of the city under those 4 different scenarios, which would be the 1980 LCLUP, the current draft, or the 2020 city draft, and then the SRA alternative modifications as well.
So all to say, getting back to the scope of meeting number 3 is to lay it all out and then see what the level of understanding is and do we need a 5-meeting system, or is council ready to go with meeting number 4? You can make that decision at meeting number 3, but if the sort of preliminary reaction is, well, we're probably going to need 5 meetings, then that would be good for me to hear so we can tentatively plan on that timeline. And then, you know, we do meeting number 3, we take what comes out of that, and then we plan meeting number 4. And what's going to be required in meeting number 4? Where do we need to be at? Does it need to be an all-day Saturday? Does it need to be a regular city council meeting? And then the last meeting, whether it's meeting number 4 or meeting number 5, is council's vote on the alternate modifications letter that we need to submit to coastal staff. Or maybe after 5 meetings, you're not there. And when we continue on. I don't know, but, and again, keeping in mind, I will be clear about what we're not going to be working on during this time.
In regard to that, if I might, Mayor, it concerns me greatly to hear we're not going to work on the STR ordinance, to be honest. So I think we need to figure out for staff where the priorities are. You know, I recognize there's a 4-person planning department, but I guess what I'm not clear on is who's doing that work? Because I thought that was legal.
No.
See, I mean, it's an ordinance,
well-
so I figured it's an ordinance, it's legal,
No,
it's the legal
we will
department.
review what staff prepares. That's, you know, that's why you'll recall in all of our goal-setting sessions, when staff gives you all of the work that they're doing, I always stand up and say, did you hear all the work that they're doing? We have to review all the work that they're doing, but we do not initiate. That is not a legal project. That is a planning staff project. They have to prepare the ordinance. You know, that is their job. They then give us a draft of the final ordinance. We then review it for legality. but we don't create it.
Yeah, just generally, the development analysis of all of the options for short-term rental ordinance is a planning and city manager's office function, and the time impact is significant. I'll say what I said at the beginning of the heritage tree ordinance reworking, is that buckle up, because this is going to be super time-consuming. So is the STR ordinance work. And we honestly, every month you extend out this all-consuming LCLUP work, combined with, in parallel, the housing element work that we need to do, just extends that out. We just, honestly, I'm just being honest and frank and transparent as your city manager. It's not work that hired consultants can do for us. They can help on some things, and we support planning staff with contractors, but it's work that we have to do because there's so many legal, political, community nuances to it.
I hate to keep beating on this, but I think my main concern for meeting 3 is to understand the green sections. Before I can talk about SRAs, I need to understand, maybe those green changes are going to be enough. I don't know, because I need to be able to make sure that I understand them. And so, to me, it's two separate things, and I feel like one needs to happen before the next. I
So-
don't know what y'all think about that, but.
And if I may, Council,
Can you guys please not talk during the meeting? If you want to talk, go outside. Thank you.
tricky overlap there. The SRA concept, the neighborhood approach concept affects the green
That's what I thought.
policies. So they're interrelated. So you can't separate them. They're all very interrelated. Is that a good way to say that?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that. So you're saying
That
that,
needs to be clarified.
you're saying that the green policies might change if we do SRAs? Because the greens are for non-SRAs, right? I mean, one of the questions I asked early on is, so if we do the SRAs, does that mean the whole 125 other comments don't apply to these areas? And then I was told, well, some apply, a lot of the difficult ones don't. But again, that's where we have no clarity to understand what applies where, where we are right now.
And that's the goal of meeting number 3, is to be able to illustrate and explain that.
Okay.
And if Ms. Cervantes has kind of a specific example that would help elucidate that.
No, I was just going to respond with, essentially, the alternative mod that the city might propose is affected by the SRA. So the SRA may fix problems in the greenies that will dictate what our potential alternative modification is, and that's why they are so interlinked.
So you are saying the SRAs would change policy in the non-SRA areas?
Yeah,
So
that's
it
the way I read it. That's what I'm reading. I mean.
potentially.
Getting the clarification from staff will be helpful,
Uh-huh.
but that's the way I'm reading it, yes. If you
Yeah,
have
so-
an SRA, then you have to do this in the not SRA areas. Am I right?
Yeah, so some of the greenies, like I said, our proposed approach will be different based on what the SRAs allow and what they don't. So it might not be that those policies are not that they are, the potential mods only apply to non-SRA areas, but essentially the pros and benefits citywide is really what I'm getting at, that's what's going to be affected based on the SRAs.
I was under the impression that we had to decide whether we were going to even go with SRAs or not.
We do.
And so,
but that's the
in my opinion, you could do the green changes without having an SRA, but I'm not a planner, so.
Yes, that's correct, but again, we're looking at the pros and cons citywide, coastal-wide.
I guess I have to the postcard issue, because we're talking about the third meeting, the fourth meeting, the fifth meeting. When do we send the postcard? Which postcard, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like also, is there an opportunity for more clarity through the form of questions submitted and answers posted
Right,
prior to the third meeting occurring,
absolutely.
right?
So it's necessary.
So everyone has a chance to submit questions, staff has a chance to answer those questions, the public has a chance to digest those answers, and then we have a meeting. And perhaps there's a way to submit scenarios that clarify it in advance of the actual meeting. Do you see what I'm saying? So we're really focused on planning the meeting and getting the hybrid and is it big enough and all that kind of stuff, but I'm wondering if there isn't perhaps, in a way, online work, if you will, website-based work that goes on in advance of the meeting that gets a postcard.
What we've committed to in the recommended approach is that we would be able to address a lot of the questions we received so far, call those the FAQs that we've received, plus case studies that would all be published as part of the packet for the February 3rd meeting. I think that if we're opening up an online forum of questions, then we wouldn't be able to commit to answering all of that before a February 3rd meeting. So one of the questions for the council that I wanted to clarify is, are we going to try to do a February 3rd meeting or not, or do you want to push that back and understanding that there's workload impacts in doing that?
So can you tell us, I'm still trying to understand. So in the staff report, you talk about people asking questions ahead of time and the planning department preparing responses, right? So we haven't established a deadline of when the questions, that would start and would end, and when the responses would start and end, and how that relates to, the staff report for the meeting. But, I agree with Sue. The more information we can answer and get online for everybody to read, for everybody to have the same understanding, would help the meeting go a lot better. So if we can't make all those things happen by February 3rd, then maybe we need to delay February 3rd.
Through the mayor. Trying to solve a chicken and egg conundrum that seems to be developing before us.
Yeah.
I think that to city manager's question, if we just resign ourselves to a 5th meeting, then that makes it easier to have a February 3rd meeting, put everything on the table, see what questions remain after we have an all-day session of trying to wrap our heads around SRA, a draft letter, and every conceivable thing that we have to discuss. And then it makes the timing better to open it up for the public to deluge us with questions that we can then answer ahead of a 4th meeting, anticipating we'll need to process that so that we're ready for the 5th and final meeting.
And we almost have a month until February 3rd. I know it's a lot of work for staff, but as far as the public, and it's a time period that they
Yeah.
can get the questions in.
Maybe we don't have to give them 2 full weeks.
Right.
10
Have a
days.
cutoff date, like Mary said.
Right, exactly.
And let them, try to submit their questions, because people have the questions now.
Well, and plus, the staff already has a lot of the questions that were raised at the meeting, as Tiger presented, like explain the substantial structural modifications and whether I can replace my roof. So there are things that staff can be working on right now that will be the answers to a lot of the questions that come up anyway. So if the meeting's on February 3rd, the staff report ideally would come out. This is a big staff report with a lot of stuff. So the weekend before, say the 26th.
It's
So-
too short. We need to delay it at least by 2 weeks. We need to give them we need more time.
I think we.
That's too soon of a turnaround, in my opinion. How about the 17th instead of the 3rd? Like, we're asking a lot as it is.
We are.
Both
Yeah.
staff and the public, yeah.
We're asking a lot, for sure.
And if we're going to get a postcard out and say, you have this amount of time to ask what, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen before, in my opinion.
And then another thought I had in conjunction with all this, or maybe not, maybe it's moot. Don't we have goal setting coming up pretty darn quick?
Yeah,
Like March?
We do need to schedule that.
I mean, are we
You weren't
not
planning on
talking
doing
about
anything
goal
on
setting on
weekends
some
anytime in the
level?
Spring, right?
I'm sorry?
You weren't planning on doing anything on weekends anytime in the spring, right?
So, I mean, that's what I guess I'm wondering, like, are we front-loading goal setting in some kind of way? And if we set goals that are unattainable because of this work, then what's the point? Right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly on goal setting, it's a update to the strategic plan process. And we haven't picked a date. We need to do that, and we need to poll for, I mean, I guess if I would like to get direction about, all of council is already available on February 3rd, but we can poll again for mid-February sometime for a Saturday or, I mean, I guess that's another alternative, is it a long meeting on a weekday night instead of a Saturday, since you're adding 5 meetings instead of 4?
say it again?
The first one, we're going to need a lot of time.
Yeah.
I mean, meeting three, we're going to need a lot of time, so it needs to be weekend.
Agreed.
So we can poll for other weekends in February after February 3rd.
Okay.
Are we getting closer to consensus?
And so I heard an idea on the table about sort of not officially, but unofficially thinking that this might be a 5-meeting process. I'm seeing some head nods
Yes.
on that.
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
And in terms of, there was an interesting idea raised by Councilmember Bowles, about a venue as to whether, if it is a hybrid meeting, do we need all of the space that a Terra Nova Theater would offer, or could it occur in the council chambers? If I understood you correctly, that's sort of what you were saying, which I will say, in terms of staff resources, planning, seeking out and finding vendors to conduct that kind of mobile meeting is a project unto itself that requires time. So if we want to be more efficient, that's an option. If it can be in here with as many people, we can't, that's the other point, is we can't really turn people away in this room. So we would have to promote that there will be online participation available and hope that that works. But I guess a final say on looking at locations would be helpful, because then we need to check those dates against whatever dates council is available. And then it is potentially a facilitated meeting, so we can look into that. I think those were some of the main variables.
All
Seem
right.
to be getting close.
Okay. You push your button? Okay. No buttons are pushed. Woo. Okay, so the decision, what the objective here says, sorry, I'll have to go backwards. Consider the revised, I think we did that. We considered the revised community engagement plan. And is everybody satisfied with what they said? And you are satisfied with
Well,
what you received?
I'd like to hear input on location. Do we want to do it in the council chambers? Do we want to do a different venue?
Okay.
That's important.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sticking with Terra Nova. I think it's the biggest venue. I think that the part of that I don't know is what PCT can do for us, or you say there's an outside vendor, so it sounds like either way we can do remote. I think that Terra Nova offers the biggest space, and then after that, if we think we need a satellite space, we can talk about that. But I would just go straight for where the biggest space is that we can hold the meeting.
Sue?
When Christine brought up, how much of this can be done if it's in a hybrid format, does that relieve the need for so much space? And I'm hearing you say no.
Well, I heard city manager say no. It sounds like in the case of doing the hybrid, we can't turn people away at the door, but the fire marshal can. And so I want to go to the place where the fire marshal is less probably going to turn people away at the door.
Got it. Okay. Then I'm okay with that.
Mary?
Yeah, check on Terra Nova, and if not, I mean, the community center's bigger than this. I still think people are going to want to show up, so.
Yeah, I don't have a sense of whether people show up or, I mean, I know some people prefer to be on Zoom. I want to make sure that we have Zoom and that we have decent sound. The community center is much harder with the reverberation and so forth in the room for people to understand. And so, I haven't been in the Terra Nova Theater, so I have no idea, but,
It's designed for sound.
The acoustics are much better in there.
but sound in the room.
But
does
part of
that
what was
equate to
challenging-
Sound projection.
Was the table format with everyone talking at once and all of that. So
But I don't think we need that.
that's what I mean.
because- No.
And that's why I think, yeah, I agree with you. The PA in there isn't great. It can be a little fuzzy kind of sounding or something, so maybe community center with attention to more speakers or better projection, if that's possible, if PCT can help us, as you said.
The
Community
largest
center?
venue possible. I know we did rent control meetings at IBL, but it doesn't seem much bigger than the community center. No. Okay.
And Terra Nova, as I recall, because I used to plan events there, is around 425 seats.
Seems like that would do it.
And we don't even know if it's available.
And we don't have.
So,
So we have to find out. So it's kind of still up in the air, but
We can still prioritize what our
whether,
Yeah.
yes.
preferences are.
And I just recalled that Monday, February 19th is President's Day, 3-day weekend, probably need to avoid that Saturday.
Thank you.
So we're limited on our Saturdays in February. We will look at Terra Nova Auditorium, and we will plan on a postcard, and we will look at how to construct or manufacture an online Q&A process, and talk to PCT about remote Zoom help if they're limited, we'll do an outside vendor, and if council's in agreement with all of that, then the other head nod is just the recognition that there are numerous other planning, work plan items that are going to get delayed.
Yes.
Think we got it.
And I just wanted to clarify, one of the questions I asked, I just want to make sure the public knows, so the results of the meeting December 5th of all the different groups will be published online, right? Staff has that information. It was going to be published before December 3rd.
Yeah, I think
That's-
that the
we all
intent
have-
was to publish that as part of the packet and/or online for the February 3rd meeting, so whenever the meeting occurs,
Maybe it
it'll
could,
be published.
yeah, it could even go earlier online, if we can add that to a website discussion or so. I mean, the more information that's there that we can all be reading, and trying to understand the community's concerns ahead of time.
Yeah.
May we take a, let's see, what time is it? 7-minute break. It's 10:33. And if we can be back at 10:40. Thank you. final list. The only item that was communicated to me was the item of CK. And I talked to the person who was interested, and up till today, I decided that I changed my mind. Sorry, I'm not speaking very well.
I think we can do everything above board at this point. There's no secrets here.
There is no secret. Anyway, so I would like to continue as the CCAG rep, but instead of having Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer as the alternate, we would move that to Tiger Big Stick.
With your permission, Mayor Pro Tem.
With your permission. Are there any other changes that anyone would like to make?
I want to check on availability, just exploring, because the city clerk chided us not to talk about it much in advance of tonight's meeting, so I didn't. But here's the thing. I've been having a little bit of a hard time getting to all the BAC meetings, and there isn't an alternative. For example, there was a meeting last week. I didn't make it to it. There was another meeting within 2 months ago. I didn't make it. And I don't want to neglect beautification, but my schedule just hasn't been working real well lately. So, but that doesn't mean.
It says I'm the alternative. I didn't even know that.
But maybe it's because you have a conflict.
I do.
So sometimes we have alternates that the conflict.
Oh, yeah, we might want to revisit that.
So, I mean, I'll do my best, but that's been a little bit challenging. And then the other thing is, I just got a notification, and I don't know if you got it, Councilmember Bowles, about the meeting on the 17th, pre-hospital, blah, 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 JPA.
I'm sorry, what, JP?
SMC JPA,
Oh.
Advanced Life Support Pre-Hospital
Oh.
Emergency.
Oh, January 17th? No, I don't think or not that I've seen,
Okay,
but
So I
can
think-
check real quick if I can go to that, or,
right, because you're the alternate for that, and I have a conflict that night, but it
Oh.
only ends up having like one meeting a year, because they
Uh-huh.
usually end up canceling one of them.
that is my emergency preparedness night.
Okay, so that's why, see, so some of these alternates really aren't good alternates. So we should probably take it off, right? So, I guess I'll just figure it out. Never mind, I'll do it. Okay.
I would like to ask about the Joint Articulation Committee. That's something I'd really like to learn more about, since I'm not involved in the schools, and so I see that
We haven't met.
you haven't met.
It's been in flux, so I'm not sure it's.
Yeah.
Do you have information from talking to the other executive
Well,
directors?
The last that I had heard, and Councilmember Beer is nodding her head, so I think she was at the meeting, is the Joint Articulation Committee as a four-way group, the two school districts, the city, and the water district, is no longer meeting.
Correct.
And the decision was to split off into one-on-one meetings between agencies as the agencies felt necessary to do. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I think at this point in time, this is not something that, I don't think the committee has ever sort of really been in writing, so to speak, but at this point in time, joint articulation is not happening.
That's correct.
So, however, we have had liaison relationships, like with North Coast County Water. You and I've been attending their board meetings. You had a process that seems not to be happening anymore,
Because we don't need it anymore.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
Knock on wood.
I don't know if we want to, I think we should just play it by ear. I mean,
It might be good to have, like, designated folks to meet with the school districts.
I think so.
Yeah.
But there's no set meetings at this point,
No.
right? So maybe we should establish our own 2x2s for these different groups, just so we're at the ready. And then if there is a meeting or a need to have a meeting, it's you and you, it's you and you, right? What do you think, Sue?
That sounds good to me.
Well, then I'm going to propose Valderlas and Beckmeyer for North Coast County Water.
Yes. Is that fine with everybody else?
Very happy.
And the elementary district? Oh, thank you. I always forget that. Thank you. The elementary district, what two people would like to do that?
And
If I
it's
could
just
chime
elementary
in.
and not high
Yes.
school too?
So I don't think as part of this item, we can create new
Oh, okay.
subcommittees.
These would be ad hoc anyway, so maybe we just leave them off of this and do it separate, because if there are two people,
Yeah, an ad hoc would be a very
Appointed,
specific thing
right.
for a purpose, but if it's an interagency meeting, that could be a separate council action item to create, but that's not what this item is
Okay.
tonight. We're
So-
removing ones that don't exist or ad hocs that finish their work. We're
So we
taking
should
those
just
off, but we can't
strike
create
the
new.
joint articulation one then? Is that your recommendation, city manager? Because it doesn't exist anymore?
Because it doesn't exist anymore.
So we strike it and then we put a pin in it to bring another item later if we need to do that.
So we do have liaisons for the water district, which are currently listed as Beer and Beckmeyer.
High school district, hold on.
and that was the liaisons for the water district for a specific item, right?
No.
No, we go to the
No?
board meeting.
Oh.
No.
And that was
Okay.
created last year. City Clerk Coffey can remind me, but specifically in the staff report, we talked about creation of that. And the
Yeah.
council was going to deliberate about creating that liaison committee.
Correct, and that was for the purpose of the designated council member or the alternate to attend the North Coast County Water District regular meetings.
Right.
Okay,
So
so
is that
to
staying the
observe-
same? That stays
I
the
can
same?
keep doing that.
Will have to be discussed, yeah.
Do you want to swap out?
If you want to do it, Sue.
I don't want to add another committee.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine keeping it.
Okay.
So Mayor Pro Tem, is the idea that we're breaking up joint articulation and trying to kind of,
No, we're just
No,
going
I-
to,
Do
We
that.
can't do that.
I appreciate that we can't do that at this meeting, but given that water district is already pre-assigned a liaison, if we want to take it a step further and do the same with the school district, I was just going to suggest we can bring that back at a future meeting. It would presumably be a relatively short item, merely to say, yes, we want a liaison to the school district, and these are the two who it makes.
I want to give us time check too.
okay.
So I move that we end at 11:20.
Second.
Please vote.
The motion to extend the meeting to 11:20, made by Big Stick and seconded, I heard by Beer, passes unanimously.
Okay. Are there any other changes to the existing liaison committee and commission form?
So back to the joint articulation, the school district was the only part of that aside from the water district, right? It wasn't,
Two school districts.
oh, was it Jefferson Union also?
Yes.
Yeah, Jefferson Union pulled out.
Okay, so can we do them both at a thing to be brought back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that. I mean, I feel like there's actually a lot going on that relates to both of us, the housing element work, the traffic work with school kids dropped off, and I think it would be good to have more regular conversations to see, make sure we're communicating and have good partnerships.
And you want to do PSD?
PSD,
I think we have to bring it all back.
Oh,
We can't
okay.
talk about that now.
yeah.
Okay, we'll bring it back.
Okay.
Next item. Okay, Mayor.
Are there any other changes that people would like to make
I-
on this list?
I'm currently the alternate for the Emergency Services Council. I certainly can continue if there's nobody who wants to be, but I wouldn't mind swapping that with somebody or giving it to somebody.
And that's an alternate, so you're not
It's
there
just
all the
an
time?
alternate spot.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that.
That makes sense, given the work
Emergency
you're already doing with
services.
emergency preparedness.
Okay, so that's Bowles.
Okay.
In terms of the existing list, I wanted to point out that the Pride Planning Ad Hoc Subcommittee had served its purpose. So that should be removed unless council wants to bring back and appoint another one, but then it's not really an ad hoc anymore, but. And
Okay.
then,
I'm curious about why you thought it served its purpose, or?
yeah, the scope of it was through Pride of last year until debrief after Pride,
Oh,
and that was the end of it.
oh, well, we should probably bring that back at another time to talk about it.
Is it agendized in such a way we can talk about it now? Okay.
And then the council chambers.
Yeah, that one's done.
And then the question I had about council chambers, the only piece that's unfinished with the council chambers is the
The art
community art corner. So
Yeah,
if that's on the near horizon, then that can stick around until.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we keep that one?
Unchanged,
Okay.
you're going to keep it.
And the committee and commission charter ad hoc, we still need that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you
We're
got the
not
doodle
done yet.
poll, right?
Hmm?
Did you get the doodle poll?
No.
There was a doodle poll. We're still active.
When?
There was only one date that I was available, but let's do that offline.
Okay.
Anything else?
And then just for clarification on the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project outreach ad hoc, is that continuing?
Yes.
Definitely.
I'm happy to swap that out if somebody else wants to do that, but
We should,
I think we need to keep the ad hoc subcommittees as they were formed,
well,
correct? Or-
yeah, we either need to keep it as it was formed, or we need to create a new committee.
okay, it's cool, we'll keep it.
Okay. And, you know, usually, it's not, written in stone, but usually ad hocs last for a year. That's
Got it.
usually, they can go longer, but
Should be done
if
Just one
it's,
meeting.
just keep that in mind. So you're almost done with BBRIP, and you're almost done with all the other ad hocs that are still going to be existing in this next year. We don't know when they're going to terminate, but they're likely to terminate in the next few months.
Okay,
Otherwise, we're just going to have to dissolve these ad hocs and we'll just create new ad hocs with new purposes.
okay.
Any further discussion or changes? We also have to open up public comment, and then I can summarize the changes I've heard.
Okay. I will open it for public comment. Would anyone in the public like to speak on the commissions and committees? Seeing none, is there anyone on the phone?
There are no raised hands.
So we'll bring that back to the council. And would someone like to make a motion on that?
May I just summarize the changes that I heard so
Yes,
that we can
yes.
confirm those? For CCAG representative, changing the alternate from Beckmeyer to Big Stick. For Emergency Services Council, changing the alternate from Big Stick to Bowles. Removing the Joint School District Water District City Articulation Committee. I heard some discussion about a potential change to North Coast County Water District, but I believe ultimately we're falling on leaving that the same. And then also there was some discussion about the San Mateo County Joint JPA Advanced Life Support, ultimately leaving that the same with Beckmeyer as the representative and Bowles as the alternate.
Except for, I think Bowles couldn't do it, right? Because you have another meeting that,
Yeah, if it's always the third Wednesday, then I have a conflict.
I know.
But you have a
Well,
conflict too.
Isn't
don't
that
you?
third Wednesday, the library advisory?
Second Wednesday.
Oh, no, second, yeah, I kept doing that. You're right.
Does that mean you no longer have a conflict?
No, it wasn't because of that. It was a different thing on my calendar. It's fine. Okay.
And then there was some mention of the Beautification Advisory Committee appointments, but I didn't hear a change acknowledged.
Is there an interest, or can someone be a second on that one? Because I don't like not being there, but I can't always be there. It is the first Wednesday of the month at 6:30 at the Public Works courtyard. Mary has a conflict, right, Mary,
I do.
as the alternate. So can someone else be an alternate on the first Wednesday of the month at 6:30?
I have a conflict every other month with the airport roundtable, so, you know,
You could be half an alternate.
it can be half an alternate.
Okay.
As-
Well, then hopefully it'll land on the time I can't go.
As long as I don't have to be your alternate on March 6th, I can be your alternate for BAC.
You available March 6th? Just kidding. How does that work, actually? If the alternate can't make it, can another council member be subbed in without having to do a council action over that?
No, because stringing those along, unless I'm mistaken, would create a majority of council involved in that committee.
Good enough.
All right, well, why don't we put you down, Christine, and then we'll hope for the best. Does that sound reasonable?
Or Tiger's
You-
more available.
Did
than-
you have
No, I said I
ongoing-
can,
Oh, just that one time you
just the
had?
March 6th I have a thing, and otherwise I
Okay.
can be your alternate.
Yay.
So I'm
And
hearing that we're changing Beer to Big Stick as the alternate for Beautification Advisory Committee,
Yes.
and Beckmeyer remains the primary.
Yep.
you can mostly do it, right?
Wait, do you want to be the primary?
No,
And I'll do the alternate?
no.
That's what I thought. Okay. I think that's all I had.
And then we're removing the 2023 Pride Planning Ad Hoc Subcommittee and keeping the Council Chambers Renovations Ad Hoc Subcommittee for now. Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project Phase 2 Outreach Ad Hoc Subcommittee keeping for now, and Committee Commission Charter Review Ad Hoc Subcommittee keeping for now. And that concludes the changes that I heard proposed for the council liaison assignments.
Someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Please vote.
Waiting for one more vote light. Oh, there we go.
Did I not do it right?
And with the motion made by Big Stick and seconded by Beckmeyer, the vote to update the council liaison assignments as summarized passes unanimously.
Okay, so the meeting is adjourned at 11:05. I'm going to do a tiger.
When are these JPA meetings? First Monday, February, May, June.